The locks are changed, Diane. Don't make a scene. Diane Calloway stood on the front porch of the house she'd paid the mortgage on for 23 years, holding 2 grocery bags and a key that no longer fit, and listened to her husband say those words through the door he wouldn't open. "Richard, let me in." "I can't do that." "It's my house." "It's my house. Has been since the refinance. Your name came off the deed in 2021. You signed the papers." "You told me those were tax documents." "And you didn't read them. That's not my problem." The grocery bags were getting heavy. Milk, eggs, bread, the chicken thighs that were on sale at Kroger, the same things she bought every Thursday because Thursday was shopping day, and Diane Calloway had been running this household on a schedule for 23 years, while Richard ran his accounting firm and took clients to lunch and, apparently, at some point, removed her name from the deed to her own home. "Richard, it's 40 degrees. Let me get my things." "Your things are in the driveway." Diane turned. 3 black garbage bags sat at the bottom of the porch steps. Her clothes, her shoes, her toiletries. 23 years of personal belongings sorted into 3 bags by a man who'd decided she was finished. Where am I supposed to go? The door opened 2 inches. Richard's face appeared in the gap. 61, gray at the temples. The face she'd woken up next to for 8,395 mornings. He didn't look angry. He looked administrative, like he was closing an account. "That's not really my concern anymore, Diane. I filed for divorce. You'll be served Monday. My lawyer says you're entitled to alimony. We'll negotiate. But the house is mine, and I need you off the property." "There's someone in there, isn't there?" Richard's expression didn't change, but his eyes moved, a fraction of a second, glancing behind him, toward the living room where Diane could hear music playing. Soft. Jazz. The kind Richard never listened to. "Goodbye, Diane." The door closed. The deadbolt turned. A new deadbolt. She could tell by the sound. Brighter. Tighter. The sound of a lock that had never known her hand. Diane set the grocery bags on the porch. She wouldn't need the chicken thighs anymore. She picked up the 3 garbage bags, carried them to her car. Her car, at least. A 2016 Honda Civic with 127,000 miles that Richard had wanted to sell last year, but she'd fought to keep because it was the one thing in her name that she'd paid for herself. She put the bags in the trunk, got in the driver's seat, sat there. 59 years old. 3 garbage bags. A car with a check engine light. $1,800 in a savings account Richard didn't know about, the one she'd opened in 2019, when something in his voice started sounding like departure. She didn't cry. Not yet. Crying required processing, and right now her brain was still buffering, trying to reconcile the morning, normal, routine, buy groceries, come home, with the evening. Homeless, divorced, replaced by jazz music. She started the car, pulled out of the driveway, didn't look at the house in the rearview mirror. If you've ever had someone rewrite your life without asking your permission, this story is for you. Subscribe and stay until the end, because the abandoned lighthouse Diane Calloway found on the coast of Maine didn't just give her a roof. It gave her something Richard had spent 23 years taking away. A light of her own. Diane drove north, not because she had a plan, because south was Florida and her mother's voice saying, "I told you he was no good," and she couldn't handle that yet. West was Pennsylvania, and Richard's family who'd never liked her. East was ocean. North was Maine. And Maine was where Diane had been happy once. Before Richard. Before the mortgage. Before the 23 years of running a household that was apparently never hers. She'd spent 2 summers there as a teenager, working at a seafood shack in a town called Anchor Point. A place so small, the zip code felt like an apology. She drove 10 hours, stopped once for gas and coffee, ate a granola bar from her purse at a rest stop in New Hampshire where the bathroom was cold and the mirror showed a woman who looked like she'd aged 5 years since Thursday morning. She arrived in Anchor Point at 3 a.m. The town was asleep. Population 900. Fewer now, probably. The seafood shack was gone. The motel where she'd stayed that summer was still there, sagging under 35 years of salt air and budget repairs. She checked in. $49 a night. The room smelled like pine cleaner and damp carpet. She slept for 14 hours. When she woke, it was Friday afternoon. The light through the window was gray and soft. Coastal light, the kind that didn't assault you the way inland light did. It just arrived, patient, and waited for you to notice. She showered, put on clean clothes from garbage bag number 2, walked into Anchor Point. The town had shrunk since she'd been here. Half the storefronts on Main Street were closed. Papered windows, faded "for lease" signs. The particular silence of businesses that had died without anyone bothering to hold a funeral. But some remained. A hardware store, a diner called The Galley, a post office, a bait shop that doubled as a convenience store. She went to The Galley because she hadn't eaten a real meal in 36 hours. The diner was warm, smelled like bacon and coffee, and the particular mixture of sea salt and cooking oil that she remembered from 35 years ago. 6 booths, a counter with stools, a chalkboard menu that listed the specials in handwriting that leaned left like it was fighting the wind. "Sit anywhere, hun." The waitress was 60-something, red hair going gray, arms that suggested she'd been carrying plates since before Diane was born. "Coffee, please. And whatever the special is. Clam chowder, made this morning, best on the coast, and I'll fight anyone who says otherwise." The chowder was extraordinary. Thick, creamy, with chunks of clam and potato that tasted like the ocean had personally seasoned them. Diane ate 2 bowls. The warmth spread through her like a slow answer to a question she hadn't known she was asking. "You visiting?" the waitress asked, refilling her coffee. Her name tag said Maureen. "I'm not sure what I'm doing." "Well, that's honest." Maureen leaned against the counter. "Most people who end up in Anchor Point in November aren't sure what they're doing. The ones who come in summer are tourists. The ones who come when it's cold are looking for something. Or running from something. Same thing usually. Different direction." Diane looked out the window. The harbor was visible. Boats rocking, gulls circling, the gray water stretching to a horizon that looked like it had been drawn with a pencil. "Is there anywhere to rent?" Diane asked. "Long-term? Cheap?" "Cheap is all we've got, but long-term is harder. Most of the rentals are summer cottages. Owners lock them up after Labor Day." Maureen thought. "There's Agnes Whitfield's apartment above the bait shop. Agnes passed last spring. Her nephew owns it now, but he's in Portland and doesn't care. Might rent it if you ask." "How much?" Agnes paid $500, but that was Agnes pricing. She'd been there 40 years. He'd probably want $700. $700. Diane had $1,800. That was 2.5 months. After that, nothing. Unless the alimony came through, which required a divorce that required lawyers she couldn't afford. "There's another option," Maureen said slowly, "but it's not exactly conventional. I'm sleeping in a motel that smells like mildew. My bar for conventional is low." Maureen pointed out the window. Past the harbor, past the breakwater, at the end of a rocky peninsula that jutted into the Atlantic like a fist. A lighthouse. White tower, red cap, standing alone against the sky. "Pelican Point Light," Maureen said. "Decommissioned in 2008. Coast Guard turned it over to the town. Town couldn't afford to maintain it. It's been empty for 16 years. A lighthouse. The keeper's cottage is attached. 4 rooms, a kitchen, a bathroom. No electricity. The grid connection was cut when they decommissioned. No heat except the fireplace. Roof leaks in 2 places. Windows are drafty. The whole thing needs work." "Why are you telling me about it?" "Because the town council has been trying to find someone to live there for 10 years. They'll give it to anyone willing to maintain it. Free. No rent. You just have to keep it standing." Diane looked at the lighthouse. White against gray. Alone on the rocks, surrounded by nothing but ocean and wind, and the kind of silence that either destroys you or saves you, depending on what you're made of. "Can I see it?" Maureen pulled a key from under the counter. "I'm on the preservation committee. I've got the key." "You keep the lighthouse key behind a diner counter?" "Hun, this is Anchor Point. The mayor keeps the town budget in a shoebox. We're informal. Tap like if you believe that the thing you need most sometimes shows up disguised as the thing nobody else wants. Because that lighthouse had been waiting 16 years for someone to walk through its door. And Diane Calloway was about to find out why. The walk to Pelican Point took 20 minutes along a path that wound over rocks, slick with spray and seaweed. Diane's sneakers, the ones she'd grabbed from garbage bag number 3, weren't made for this. Neither were her knees. But she kept going because Maureen was ahead of her, moving over the rocks with the confidence of someone who'd walked this path 1,000 times. "How long has the cottage been empty?" Diane asked, breathing hard. 16 years officially, but nobody's lived there full-time since Harold Peck died in 2003. He was the last keeper. Coast Guard automated the light in 95, but Harold stayed on as a caretaker until he passed. After that, the town tried to turn it into a museum. Ran out of money. Tried to sell it. Nobody wanted it. Tried to tear it down. Historic preservation blocked it. So it just sits here. It sits here and rots. Which is a shame, because Harold loved this place. He maintained it like a church. They reached the lighthouse. Up close, it was larger than it looked from town. The tower rising 60 feet, the keeper's cottage attached to its base like a barnacle. Stone walls 2 feet thick, built to survive storms that would flatten anything made by people who didn't understand the ocean. The cottage door was heavy oak, swollen with moisture. Maureen turned the key. The lock resisted, then gave. Inside, dust, cold, the smell of salt and old stone, and something else. Wood smoke. Faint, embedded in the walls from a century of fires in the massive stone fireplace that dominated the main room. 4 rooms, as promised. The main room with the fireplace, a kitchen with a cast-iron stove, and a hand pump connected to a cistern. 2 bedrooms upstairs, with windows that faced the ocean on 3 sides. And a bathroom with a clawfoot tub and plumbing that Diane could hear groaning in the walls like it wanted to work but had forgotten how. The furniture was still there. Harold's furniture. Heavy, handmade, built for a man who spent his life in a place that punished anything flimsy. A table of solid oak. Chairs with joints so tight they didn't creak. A bed frame that could have survived a hurricane. And the tower. A spiral staircase, iron, narrow, 73 steps, Diane counted, leading up to the lamp room. The light was gone, removed by the Coast Guard, but the room remained. Glass on all sides. 360 degrees of ocean and sky, and the kind of view that made you understand why people built towers in the first place. Diane stood in the lamp room and looked at the world. Behind her, the town, the harbor, the diner where she'd eaten chowder. In front of her, nothing. Just water, stretching to a horizon that promised nothing and threatened nothing and simply existed, indifferent and enormous. She felt something crack inside her. Not break, crack. The way ice cracks when the river underneath starts moving again. "I'll take it," she said. Maureen was still downstairs. "You haven't seen the roof leaks." "I'll take it." "The plumbing doesn't work." "I'll fix it." "You know how to fix plumbing?" "No. I'll learn." Maureen appeared at the bottom of the spiral staircase, looking up at Diane silhouetted against the gray sky. "You're serious?" "I've been not serious for 23 years. I've been agreeable and accommodating and patient and careful, and I signed documents I didn't read, and I kept a house that was never mine, and I lost everything because I trusted someone who was counting on exactly that." Diane came down the stairs, step by step. Her knees complained on every one. "I'm done being careful. This lighthouse needs someone. I need somewhere. That's enough math for me." Maureen handed her the key. "Town council meets Tuesday. I'll put you on the agenda. But as far as I'm concerned, you're already home." The first month was the hardest thing Diane had ever done. Harder than childbirth. She'd had 2, both grown now, both living in cities that didn't have lighthouses, both calling occasionally to ask if she was okay with the particular tone of children who hoped the answer was yes, so they could go back to their lives. She was not okay. She was freezing, exhausted, and living in a stone cottage with no electricity, no heat except a fireplace she didn't know how to use properly, and plumbing that produced a sound like a dying whale when she turned the taps. But she was free. And freedom, she discovered, was colder and harder and more beautiful than she'd imagined. The fireplace was first. She learned from YouTube videos watched on her phone in the parking lot of the galley, where the Wi-Fi was free and Maureen kept the coffee coming. She learned to build a fire that lasted. Base of crumpled newspaper, kindling in a teepee, logs on top, damper open, patience. The first night, she got the fire right. Really right. Not the smoky, sputtering attempts of the first week, but a proper, roaring, heat-throwing fire that turned the stone walls orange and made the cottage feel like the inside of a heartbeat. She sat in Harold's chair and cried. Not from sadness, from the overwhelming sensation of having made warmth with her own hands in a place that was her own. The plumbing was next. The hand pump in the kitchen worked. The cistern collected rainwater from the roof, and November in Maine provided plenty of rain. But the bathroom pipes were frozen, burst in 3 places, corroded everywhere else. She couldn't afford a plumber. But the hardware store on Main Street was run by a man named Cal Prentice, 76, retired lobsterman, who'd pivoted to hardware when his knees gave out, and who had the particular patience of someone who'd spent 50 years waiting for traps to fill. "I need to fix pipes," Diane told him. "In the lighthouse cottage." "Pelican Point? Those pipes are 50 years old." "I know. What do I need?" Cal looked at her for a long moment. Then he spent 2 hours showing her. Copper pipe, flux, a torch, fittings, how to solder, how to test, how to swear at joints that wouldn't seal, and then try again. "You've never done this before," he said. "I've never done any of this before." "Then why are you doing it?" "Because nobody else is going to." Cal gave her the supplies at cost. Then he drove out to the lighthouse the next day to check on his inventory and ended up spending 4 hours on his knees in the bathroom showing her how to sweat a pipe properly. "You're not terrible at this," he said, watching her solder her 5th joint. "High praise." "For a beginner, it is." The pipes worked by the end of the 2nd week. Cold water only. Hot would require a water heater, which required electricity or propane, which required money she didn't have. But cold water from a tap she'd fixed herself tasted better than any water Richard had ever poured from a filter in a kitchen she'd apparently never owned. Tap-like if you've ever discovered that your hands could build what your life couldn't provide. Because Diane was about to find something in that lighthouse that would change everything. Not in the cottage, in the tower. The discovery happened on a Tuesday. Diane was cleaning the tower, sweeping the spiral staircase, clearing cobwebs from the lamp room windows, the routine maintenance she'd taken on because maintaining the lighthouse was her rent, and she paid her debts, even the ones that weren't financial. On the 37th step, her broom hit something. A loose stone in the wall, not crumbling, just slightly proud of the surface, like it had been placed rather than mortared. She pulled it out. Behind it was a cavity, a space in the thick stone wall, maybe 8 inches deep, lined with tin to keep out moisture. Inside the cavity was a metal box. Tin, painted green, the size of a bread loaf. She carried it down to the kitchen, set it on the oak table, opened it. Letters. Dozens of them, bound in twine, written in a hand so precise it looked engraved. And a journal, leather-bound, water-stained at the edges, filled with the same careful handwriting. The first page of the journal read, "The record of Pelican Point Light, kept by Harold Peck, keeper, begun 1962. Harold's journal. 41 years of entries. From 1962, when he was appointed keeper at 24, to 2003, when he died in this cottage at 65. Every day recorded. Weather, tides, ships, repairs, visitors. The daily log of a man whose job was to keep a light burning and whose life was defined by the discipline of doing it. But the journal was more than a lighthouse log. Harold had also recorded the history of Anchor Point. Not the official history, but the real one. The stories nobody wrote down because writing them down would have required acknowledging things the town preferred to forget. He wrote about the fishing families who'd been forced out in the 1970s when a corporation bought the harbor rights and tripled docking fees. About the school that closed in 1983 because the state said 200 students wasn't enough to justify funding. About the summer people who bought cottages and raised prices until the year-round residents couldn't afford to live in the town they'd built. And he wrote about the lighthouse itself. Pelican Point Light had been built in 1874 by a man named Ezra Whitfield, the great-great-grandfather of Agnes Whitfield, the woman who'd lived above the bait shop until she died last spring. Ezra had built it not because the government told him to. The official lighthouse wouldn't be commissioned until 1879, but because ships were wrecking on the rocks and nobody was doing anything about it. He'd built it with his own money, his own hands. Stone quarried from the peninsula itself, carried up the slope by Ezra and his wife, Margaret, and their 3 children and whoever in town could be convinced to help. It took them 2 years. When it was finished, Ezra lit the lamp and kept it burning every night for 23 years, until the government took over and installed a Fresnel lens and a proper keeper who wasn't a fisherman with ideas above his station. Harold's journal contained something else, a letter from Ezra Whitfield, written in 1901, found by Harold in the same wall cavity where Diane had found the box. I built this light because men were dying on the rocks. The government said a lighthouse was too expensive. The shipping company said the losses were acceptable. Acceptable. That was the word they used for dead men. I decided that if acceptable meant letting people drown, I would be unacceptable. I quarried the stone. I mixed the mortar. I lit the lamp. And for 23 years, no ship wrecked on Pelican Point. Not one. Let them put that in their budget and calculate whether it was worth the expense. Diane read Ezra's letter 3 times. Then she read Harold's journal from the beginning. Every entry, every observation, every small rebellion against the forces that had tried to close the lighthouse, defund the keeper's position, and eventually decommission the light entirely. Harold had fought for decades. Letters to the Coast Guard, testimony before the town council, a petition signed by every fisherman in Anchor Point. All of it documented, all of it ignored. The final entry, dated October 2nd, 2003, 12 days before Harold died, was addressed to no one and everyone. The light goes dark next month. They say GPS and radar make it unnecessary. Maybe they're right. But a lighthouse isn't just navigation. It's a promise. Someone is here. Someone is watching. Someone cares whether you make it home. Turn off the light, and the promise goes dark too. I don't know who'll read this. I'm putting it in the wall where Ezra put his letter, because walls hold things longer than people do. If you find this, and if you're the kind of person who believes that some things are worth maintaining even when the world says they're obsolete, then maybe you're the person this lighthouse has been waiting for. Keep it standing. That's all I ask. Diane set down the journal, looked at the tower through the kitchen window. 60 feet of stone, built by a fisherman who refused to let people drown, maintained by a keeper who refused to let the light die. And now her. I found something, she told Maureen the next morning at the galley. She showed her the journal, the letters, Ezra's words, Harold's final entry. Maureen read Harold's last paragraph and put her hand over her mouth. He knew, Maureen whispered. He knew someone would find it. He built it into the wall, like Ezra did 100 years before him. What are you going to do with this? I'm going to do what Harold asked. Keep it standing. The lighthouse doesn't have a light anymore. Then I'll put one back. Maureen looked at her. You're serious? A man built this lighthouse with his bare hands because ships were dying on his rocks. Another man kept it alive for 40 years because he believed the promise mattered. They both hid their words in the wall because they trusted that someone would come along who understood. Diane paused. I'm that someone. I don't know why. I don't have money or skills, or any qualification beyond being too stubborn to quit. But I'm here, and I'm not leaving. The town council met the following Tuesday. Diane attended. She brought the journal. She read Harold's final entry aloud. The 5 council members, all locals, all old enough to remember Harold, all ashamed enough about the lighthouse to shift in their seats, listened in silence. "I'm asking for permission to restore the light," Diane said. "Not the original Fresnel lens, that's in a museum, but a modern LED beacon, solar-powered, low maintenance, enough to serve as a navigational aid and to honor what this lighthouse was built for." "That would require Coast Guard approval," said the council chair, a lobsterman named Ed Murphy, who'd known Harold personally. "I've already contacted them. They have a program for heritage lighthouse restoration. If the town sponsors the application, they'll provide the equipment and the certification. Cost to the town? 0. And the cottage? The maintenance? I'm living there. I'm doing the maintenance. The roof leaks are patched. The plumbing works. The fireplace is operational. I've been doing this for 6 weeks without asking anyone for anything except pipe fittings." Ed looked at the other council members, then at Diane, then at the journal on the table. "Harold would have liked you," he said. The vote was unanimous. The light installation happened in March. Coast Guard sent a 2-person crew who installed the LED beacon in 4 hours. Solar panel on the tower's south face, battery backup in the lamp room, automated, dusk to dawn, flashing white, visible for 12 nautical miles. They turned it on at sunset. The whole town came, all 900 of them, or at least it felt that way. They stood on the breakwater and the harbor wall and the rocky shore below the peninsula, and they watched the light come on for the first time in 16 years. It wasn't the old light, wasn't the massive Fresnel lens that had turned the ocean white for 100 years. It was smaller, quieter, modern. But it was a light on a tower, built by a fisherman, kept by a keeper, and now maintained by a woman who'd been thrown out of her own house with 3 garbage bags and had driven north until she found a place that needed her as much as she needed it. Cal Prentice stood beside Diane on the rocks. He'd brought a flask of something that smelled like bad decisions and Maine tradition. "You did it," he said. "Harold did it. And Ezra before him, I just showed up." "Showing up is the whole thing, Diane. Everything else is just details." He offered the flask. She drank. It was terrible. She drank again. The light swept the water. Flash, dark. Flash, dark. A rhythm as old as the ocean, as simple as a heartbeat, as necessary as someone standing in the dark saying, "I'm here. I see you. Come home safe." Richard served the divorce papers in April. Diane signed them in the keeper's cottage, at Harold's oak table, with Maureen as a witness and a cup of the galley's clam chowder cooling beside the documents. The terms were standard. Richard kept the house, which had never been hers anyway, legally, thanks to the papers she'd signed without reading. She got alimony, $1,200 a month for 5 years, and the Honda Civic, and the contents of the 3 garbage bags. "You could fight for more," the lawyer said on the phone. "The refinance was arguably fraudulent. Your name was removed from the deed without informed consent. I don't want more from him. I don't want anything from him. The alimony covers my expenses. The car runs. And I have a lighthouse." "You have a what?" A lighthouse. In Maine. I live in it. Silence. Then, "That's not something I hear often." Her children visited in May. Sarah, 31, and James, 28. They stood at the base and looked up the way people look at things they can't believe are real. "Mom, you live in a lighthouse." "In the keeper's cottage. The lighthouse is my commute." "Dad told us you were having a breakdown." The only thing that broke down was my willingness to let other people decide what my life looked like. She showed them everything. The cottage, the tower, the journal, the plumbing she'd fixed. "You did all this yourself?" James asked, looking at the soldered pipes. "Cal helped, and Maureen, and the whole town. But I did the work." "Dad can't even change a light bulb." "Your father is very good at other things, like removing women's names from property deeds." They all laughed. It wasn't forgiveness for Richard, but it was a clearing, a space where the past was acknowledged without being permitted to define the future. The lighthouse became Diane's life, the way the ocean becomes a fisherman's life, not as a choice, but as a recognition. This was what she was for. Not the mortgage payments and the grocery schedules and the 23 years of maintaining a life that someone else owned. This. She maintained the cottage. She maintained the tower. She climbed the 73 steps every morning to check the light, clean the glass, and stand in the lamp room, watching the ocean do what it did. Move and crash and retreat and move again. Indifferent and enormous, and somehow exactly the right thing to look at when you needed to remember that the world was bigger than the person who'd hurt you. She started a small garden in the sheltered space between the cottage and the tower. Herbs mostly, and vegetables that could survive salt air. Maureen brought her seedlings. Cal built a raised bed from salvaged lumber. Ed Murphy's wife, Joan, donated a rain barrel system that caught runoff from the tower. The town noticed. Not with fanfare or ceremony. Anchor Point wasn't that kind of place. But with the slow, steady acknowledgement that the lighthouse had a keeper again, and the keeper was doing the job the way Harold had done it, and Ezra had done it before him. With stubbornness, with care, with the daily insistence that some things were worth maintaining, even when the world said they weren't. On the 1-year anniversary of her arrival, Diane climbed the tower at sunset. The light was on, flashing white, steady as a pulse. The ocean was gray going to black. The sky was the particular shade of Maine purple that happened in November, when the sun gave up early and the stars came out like they'd been waiting. She opened Harold's journal to the last entry. Read it one more time. "If you find this, and if you're the kind of person who believes that some things are worth maintaining even when the world says they're obsolete, then maybe you're the person this lighthouse has been waiting for." Diane pulled a pen from her pocket, turned to the next blank page, the first blank page in 21 years. She wrote, November 14th. Clear skies. Wind southwest at 12 knots. Light operational. Cottage maintained. Keeper present. My name is Diane Calloway. I was kicked out of my home at 59 with 3 garbage bags and a car with a check engine light. I drove until I found a place that needed me. This is that place. Harold, if you're reading this from wherever keepers go, the light is on. The promise is kept. Someone is here. Someone is watching. Someone cares whether they make it home. DC. She closed the journal, set it on the ledge beside the glass. Below her, the ocean moved. The light swept. Flash, dark. Flash, dark. And in a lighthouse, on a rocky point, at the edge of a small town that the world had mostly forgotten, a 59-year-old woman stood in the lamp room and watched the beam reach across the water. 12 nautical miles of light, cutting through the dark, sang the only thing a lighthouse had ever said. I'm here. You're not alone. Come home.